But am I going to be looking at you over here?
Yeah, I don't care. You can look wherever you want to. Is this just driving you insane that I don't care?
A little bit.
Sorry. It's not going anywhere.
All right, but so the camera's there, but I'm looking this way.
You can look where
I'm not going to look at the camera.
feel inclined to look.
Okay.
You know?
How long my answers have to be? Can they be one-word answers, or like do I have to expound?
It can be as long or as short as you would like them to be. It's up to you. Okay. What is your name, age, and your job?
My name is Gavin O'Connor. My age is 55, and my job is... What's my job?
I don't know.
I'm a filmmaker.
Okay. What's your earliest memory?
My earliest memory is being at the Arrow Motel in Montauk Point.
Really?
Yeah. And walking with my dad toward the beach. And there was a bonfire on the beach with friends of he and my mom's. It was before they divorced. And the crashing waves behind the bonfire. And that's my earliest memory.
That's a very beautiful first memory.
Yeah.
Describe your relationship with your mom and your dad.
Growing up?
Yes.
Or now?
Yes, growing up.
Growing up, my relationship with my mom was unsafe waters.
Tumultuous.
Yeah, hurricanes and tsunamis, and then every once in a while there'd be a sunny day. I remember when I would come home from school as a little boy, when I never knew when I was walking in the door what to expect. It could be a dark vortex of chaos and craziness, which was more times than not, or it could be like the shining kind of weird love.
And then what about your dad?
My dad was my safe place. He was like my shelter from the storms.
Who were you closest with him, like growing up?
Yeah, definitely much closer to my father, just because I felt safe with him, and he always, he was always there for me.
You're a twin. How do you think being a twin has affected your psychology? Because being in a psychology class, we read a lot of articles about twins, because you guys are very interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I would say growing up, it weighed on my psyche. I felt very constrained and chained by my twinship.
Really?
Yeah.
Why?
Because I don't know why, except that I just remember as a very young boy, my parents, my mom really used to dress us the same.
Exactly the same, yeah.
I'm talking when we were like, 2, 3, 4, 5.
Yep.
And I hated it. I never remember liking it.
Mm-mm.
Because it really affected my psyche in a way that was diminishing my individuality and my identity, because I didn't like the identity. And it's really interesting because, the older I got, I realized the power of twins. I had a lot of friends growing up who were twins. Mm-hmm. And they were always so close.
Yeah.
And my brother and I weren't. I was really rejecting being a twin. I didn't like...
not being seen as your own person.
Yeah. We were always, everything was, you're identified as a twin, not as an individual, and it drove me mad.
How do you think you are similar to your brother, and how do you think you're different? I'm very interested in the similar part.
There's nothing similar.
There's nothing?
There's nothing similar.
How are you different?
Well, Greg was growing up, Greg was very reserved. He would sort of hide in the shadows.
He's still very much like that.
He's still very much like that, yeah. There was a stuntedness, the kind of quality that he had that sort of I never understood him. He was always this kind of mystery to me. It was interesting, and it's so funny when you're growing up, you don't think about it, except that as I got older, I realized although we were not close. I mean, we were close in certain ways, but we weren't in a lot of ways. And I was more outgoing and more social.
Hearing it kind of sounds like, with like the twin aspect of it, you kind of were like, I'm going to put all of my energy into being seen as an individual, and he kind of just accepted that he wasn't, and kind of just stood back a little.
Yeah.
Which is really sad.
It was like I pulled ahead and just kept moving that way, and it was almost like metaphorically like looking in the rearview mirror, and he would just be he would be falling away. It's sad.
Yeah. Who did you look up to growing up?
Who did I look up to growing up?
Yeah. Or now, or both. Either or.
I didn't really look up to anybody.
Oh my God.
I really didn't.
Really?
Unfortunately. I never had mentors. I wished I did. I really wished I did. I never had mentors.
What about now? Do you look up at anybody now? Like artistically? Even?
Oh yeah, I mean, yeah, there's so many people I look up to artistically. I look up to Brooke's dad, Brad.
Morally?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Morally. Ethically.
Yeah.
He's just a really good man. I look up to anybody that I aspire to be. Just that inspires me to be a better person. Okay. But I can't say that I had that really as a child, unfortunately. No teachers.
Okay. Is there anybody that has made a big impact on you that you think that you wouldn't be here without, or be the same person without, or made the accomplishments that you have without?
So when I was growing up, I always had this, my internal struggle was artist, athlete. That was always my struggle. Yeah. And I was an athlete. I was a good athlete, but I knew that if I played sports, I would see my dad.
Yeah.
Is that okay? Does it work?
Yeah. I'm just.
So I played sports because I knew it was a guarantee that I'd see my father. That was the guarantee. Mm-hmm. So there was that, but I always felt like an artist inside, and that was a big struggle for me because I had a hard time reconciling, can you do both?
Yeah. And also probably like society-wise, you weren't encouraged to be an artist.
Well, my father was very artistic.
Really?
Yeah.
I didn't know Grandpa Jack was artistic.
Yeah, he was very artistic. Like when he was a police officer, and I discovered this from stories from people that he worked with, that he would be like in his squad car and he was always drawing dogs. He always had a sketch pad with him. And he was always drawing animals and dogs, like beautiful charcoal drawings. Mm-hmm. And he would play his guitar in the car, in his radio car. Like he'd get a call and then he'd put his guitar in the back seat and go deal with stuff. So he had an artistic spirit. And he also, we had a love of movies together. He took me to see films, and that was a big influence on me, when I would go to see. I remember I went to see The French Connection with him. I was very young. I should never have been taken to that movie, but I wanted to see it, and he took me, and I just remember thinking, the movie it took my breath away. And I just remember as a little boy going, I want that. I knew I wanted what was happening on that screen. I didn't know what it meant. Mm-hmm. I didn't know, but I knew I wanted that. But growing up on Long Island, the idea of being in the movie business or being an artist was such a distant galaxy.
I'm just checking how charged it is. Keep going.
Okay. So there were people like Billy Joel was a big influence on me. I started loving his early music when I was a small boy, and then I realized when I discovered he was from Long Island, that meant a lot to me because I was like, oh, you can be from Long Island and still be an artist and create art and maybe have an impact. So that was big for me, that you can come from where I came from, because I didn't know anybody else that was an artist that did that. And then I remember reading On the Road, Jack Kerouac, and then I found out that Jack Kerouac played football growing up. He was a really good athlete and a football player, but he was also an artist and a writer. And I was like, oh, you can play football and still be an artist. Mm-hmm. So Kerouac was big for me. And then I remember discovering like Tommy Lee Jones played football. He played football at Harvard and became an artist. So there were people like that were like kind of like beacons of light out there. It was like, oh, it can, there were people that did it.
Yeah.
And that would inspire me to go, oh, I guess if other people did, I can do it.
What was school like for you growing up?
School was not that important to me. My parents never really, it was so different back then. I mean, I went to public school. It was a good public school, but, school was more social than academic for me. And I didn't, it was easy. Like, it wasn't like it is today. I look at what you kids have. It was so much different back then. Academically, the amount of workload. It was like, we would do homework at night. I'd be done. And so sometimes I had no homework. I really didn't. It's great, but we didn't. And it just wasn't, there wasn't that kind of emphasis. I never thought about college. So, except then when I went to prep, I did a post-grad year after high school, because I was 16 my senior year of high school. I was young. So I did a post-grad year, and that year I remember really concentrating on academics, because I knew that
it mattered then.
It mattered.
Yeah.
And I was in the middle of nowhere in New Hampshire in this prep school. Mm-hmm. And they made you study 3 hours a night. It was part of we had proctors, hall monitors, which was great, because it disciplined me to sit in my desk for 3 hours. You had to sit in your desk for 3 hours and study.
I could never.
And it was great. And I had crazy good grades in prep school, because I just studied, and it wasn't like I was any smarter like that. I was just more disciplined.
Yeah. How did religion affect you growing up? Or what was your relationship with it?
I was raised Catholic.
Irish Catholic?
Roman Catholic.
Roman Catholic.
Okay. That's what I was raised. And, Bible study until I was confirmed. But I had as I got older after confirmation, I rejected the church, because I started to read a lot about the priests and, all this, abuse, crimes committed against children, really.
Yeah.
Sexual crimes committed against children, and I would be reading about how, this was, I was 13, 14 years old, but I'd read the paper. We used to get this Long Island Newsday, and, you'd read about how the church was protecting these priests.
Yeah.
And covering it up. Mm-hmm. And it really effed me up, because my mother was very Catholic, and it really, so it changed my relationship to God, because I was equating church and God together. Mm-hmm. And then as I got older, I sort of went, wait a minute,
disassociated.
Religion is just this man-made thing. I mean, God, Jesus, as I got older, was like, oh wait, Jesus was just working under the radar. He wasn't talking about Catholicism. Yeah. So that was, and then I just started to have, it was just more about a relationship. I kind of searched from the Taoism and Buddhism, and
I remember that. I remember those phases.
All those days, yeah.
Those were good phases.
But it was always really just a search for God, and I separated God and religion. Even though now I love going to church, because it just puts me in the presence of God in a really profound way.
What do you think was the most valuable lesson you learned from either of your parents?
I didn't really learn a lot of lessons from my parents.
Even if it was like a behavior that they had.
I think there was a, what's that?
That you chose not to emulate.
Exactly. I think a lot of the lessons I learned from my parents is what not to do. I hate to say that.
Yeah.
Which are good lessons, I guess. I do remember my dad taught my like little things like when you lose, don't lose the lesson.
Yeah.
It's a big lesson in losing, so don't lose that. I remember Dad talking.
I remember you saying that to me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that would be one. My dad taught me about. I remember him. He would always say to me like if you make a deal with somebody,
keep your word.
Well, no, yes, that of course, but also like if you win, and the person you made a deal with loses, it's not a good deal. Mm-hmm. He would always say a good deal is that you and the other person have to feel like they walk away winning. That's a good deal, and that was really profound for me.
Yeah. Is there anything you find interesting or inspiring about your family history?
Well, it's all on my dad's side, just my Irish roots. My dad was Irish from the ground up, so the Irish part of my family, my dad's side was, and it wasn't just like St. Paddy's Day Irish. It was just a cultural thing in our home with my father. Mm-hmm. A lot of singing, a lot of laughing, a lot of drinking. It was just my dad's side of the family, they were all immigrants from County Mayo. It was a very Irish. I just grew up in a very Irish culture when I was with him and his side of the family, and I loved it. It was beautiful.
Mm-hmm. What was high school like for you, and how was it different from college?
High school was just very provincial. I lived in a pretty big town on Long Island, but it was just provincial, and in a very specific kind of, I'd say maybe, I don't want to say narrow way of thinking, but I was living it was just a box, and going to college, it was just like the box, everything, like the chains just came off. I was just so surrounded by, culture, people that I'd never, the types of people I never met in Long Island, and people from other countries and different backgrounds. Most of the people all came from similar background that I grew up with. So my eyes were just opened in a way to, and also professors, sort of educating. I was around very educated people, and how education was important, and it really infected me, I think, in a good way.
What do you think are the 3 biggest moments throughout your life? Like the top 3 things that you remember.
That's very easy.
It is.
The 3 biggest moments in my life were number 1, when you were born. Number 2, my wedding and marrying Brooke. And number 3, when Declan was born. Those are not even close. Those are the 3 biggest.
That was what I guessed.
Moments in my life, yeah. And also the biggest God moments.
How is the world different now compared to when you were my age?
Well,
in like the biggest ways.
The internet.
Yeah.
I mean, the internet has changed everything. Social media, the way people communicate now, everything is just it's just a very different world. So the internet's changed the world.
Yeah.
So, everyone has a smartphone, cell phones. I think it's like 95% of people in America have some form of a smartphone. Mm-hmm. It's some crazy statistic like that. So everyone's walking around with their own computer in their hands.
Yeah.
So.
What do you think is the biggest issue in the world today?
The biggest issue in the world today, I would say, is Donald Trump.
Good answer. You have 2 children. Is there anything that has surprised or amazed you watching us grow up?
The thing that watching my kids, well, especially you at 17 years old now, but I remember when you were a baby, I remember thinking, I can't love you any more than I do. And I would put you to sleep at night, put you to bed. You didn't like to go to bed. unlike Declan, you were not a sleeper.
That's your fault. That's not mine.
Well, we have another one here that loves to sleep. She's an easy one, but you were very difficult to get to go to sleep. But I remember you'd go to sleep finally, and I just look at you and watch you sleep. And I remember thinking, I really remember this distinctly, thinking, I can't love her any more than I do. It's impossible to love this child any more than I do. And then the next night, I would think, oh my God, I love her more than I did last night. How is that possible? And it was really just a lesson in love, how love it's so expansive, how the heart is infinite. And that was really profound for me.
What is the best advice that you've ever received? If there is any.
Best advice I've ever received. Well, I don't know. I mean, nothing comes to mind as like something indelible.
Next question then.
Okay.
What would you like to be remembered for?
For being hopefully, if I had to remember for anything, and my legacy is being a dad more than anything else in my life, is just that I care about being a father to you and to Declan, and a good husband to Brooke. Like, those are the most important things, more than career and work and friendship. It's my, I mean, there's only 3 people on planet Earth that I would literally die for, and it's my 2 kids and my wife.
Oh.
So I think being a good father and being a good husband.
It's a great answer.
Thanks.
It's a great answer. Okay.